What's the best advice to someone who wants to be a director? And the answer I give is very simple. Be a director. Pick up a camera, shoot something, no matter how small, no matter how cheesy, no matter whether your friends and your sister star in it. Put your name on it as director. Now you're a director. Everything after that, you're just negotiating your budget and your fee. So it's a state of mind, is really the point. Once you commit yourself to do it, then the hard part starts, which is that you have to forswear all other paths, because you can't keep a foot in cabinet making and a foot in directing. You can't keep a foot in one job, and it's a total and all-consuming thing. And I suspect that many of the difficult and challenging things in the world, whether it's research or whatever, certainly in the arts, must be all-consuming, because you're in competition with people who have made that decision, who have committed themselves 100%. You're competing for resources. It's a big coral reef, and it's a big food chain, and you're competing for resources. And you're competing against people who have made that commitment. If you don't make the same commitment, you're not going to compete. It's that simple.
Wham! How you doing? This is Corey Hunter. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining me. And today we're talking about, we have tips from directors. And today we got a tip from James Cameron. This is an oldie but goldie. This is I guess a speech, an interview he had some years ago, about 2 decades ago, and it's dope because it's still relevant today. On one note, he says the way to get started is just to pick up a camera and start rocking out. The next thing he said was to commit fully to it, and then he goes on to explain why. So, pretty much, man, that was the story that I heard. I remember straight out of school, I was a PA, production assistant, and I didn't really know much about the hierarchy or the structure of filmmaking. I just wanted to make films. I went to school for actually analyzing films. I went to school, we watched movies. We learned about the history of movies in terms of the business of it, the culture of it, and we analyzed the films in terms of what it means, what the artist was trying to communicate. So we really stuck to the artistic side of it and not the architectural side of it, not the engineering side of it. So right out of school, I'm gonna make movies, so I have to become an engineer as well, right? So I became a PA because, you start from the bottom level and you go up. That's just common sense, right? One of the producers on there, PJ, great guy. Ended up being real close to this guy because we worked closely together during those few weeks, during that month. With him, as we was rocking around, because he was one of those producers who was hands-on. So we was doing everything. It was a small budget. It was a small set. And we just had to make everything happen. So as a PA, my responsibilities was everywhere, but as a producer, so was him. And pretty much my role was to assist the producer, who was we was buying stuff, returning stuff, going places, decorating it, making sure one person get from A to B, taking care of everything, right? So as we was on this journey to getting this production done, I was picking his brain. I was asking him a ton of questions, and one of the first questions I asked him was, how do you become a director? How do you make that transition from climbing the ladder and then moving over laterally, I guess? How do you get to that role? Where do you start and how do you end up there? And his answer was the same answer that James Cameron just gave, and that is pick up a camera and start shooting. That's all to it. Because you can't become a director any other way. The only way to become it is by doing it. It sounds simple, but just because it's simple don't mean it's easy. So that's one tip he gave us, and that's just the absolute truth. Because why would anybody trust you to do something that you've never done before, right? That's just common sense. So Another thing he says was and also he also talked about like making that lateral move. We so used to going up the ladder, right? And it makes sense, right? You know, you get in a bunch of medals and then you be able to move across, you know, once you're on top, you be able to move this way. But the way James Cameron explains it is if you move right here and then you want to become director, you don't move this way. You actually go back to the bottom and you're starting here and then you got to do it all over again, right? So just because you're a great writer, I mean, it's like anything else. It's different. Just because you can write don't mean you can produce. Just because you can produce don't mean you can direct, and so forth and so on. Usually all these forces occupies the same space, so they start to like rub off on each other. But just like becoming a filmmaker, you're not a filmmaker until you actually become one. That's the same with all the rest of you hats. Like being around a bunch of writers doesn't make you a writer. Writing something makes you a writer, and so on and so forth. So yeah, don't just because you're in the business don't mean that you're a filmmaker. That just makes sense. So with that said, it makes no sense if you know what you want to do, because you know there's some people who want to move around, experience things, get to know themselves, get to know what they like and dislike. There's a bunch of people who want to get into the movie business and then they find out that they don't like to edit, or they don't like to be behind the camera, or they much rather just talk to the actors. Whatever you need to do, then that makes sense in terms of you moving around roles. But if you found what you want to do, if you're trying to be tactical about it, then it just makes sense just to go down that route. That way you're not wasting time and you're perfecting your craft. It just makes the most sense. I was just talking to a friend about this. Being committed is tough because life is more than just one thing. Our lives is a combination of a bunch of things. We got the work life, we got the home life, we got our romantic life, we got the life with friends, and so on and so forth, right? And all these little pieces together becomes the entirety, the complete version of our life, right? So when you think of filmmaking, usually you think about filmmaking as a substitute for your work life, right? But there's still other parts of your lives that need to be addressed. So you still have bills, you still have responsibilities, and these things require sacrifice. Sometimes you don't want to sacrifice these things. Sometimes it may seem unethical to sacrifice these things. Well, you should want to become a filmmaker because that's something you love, and you're trying to find a way to create a living and doing something that you love. But before you get to that point, it may be rough and you may be forced to, you know, seek other avenues of making money. This is when you're bound not to become a filmmaker. This is when you're bound to lose because there's other people who are just insane. And what they're doing is they're giving it their all. They just sacrifice everything to become a filmmaker. And this is the people that you're challenging you. These is the people that's in the field. These is the people who's grinding. This is your competition. And you can't compete unless you're committed. If you're in this and you're sort of kind of enjoying it, but this ain't your thing, then just tally it up and say it is what it is. And what it is a hobby, and that's fine. But if you're trying to make a living with this, you're going to have to sacrifice and commit fully to it because the people who's in competition with you are doing the same thing. And if you want to rise to their level, you're going to have to give it your all. So, yeah, man. I'm about to get into a whole little routine. I'm about to get into a whole little rant. But I'm just going to stop it right there. But pretty much the punchline is, if you want to become a director, the only way to become a director is by directing. Pick up a camera, get some friends, shoot. If you don't got a script, write a script, get some friends, get a camera, then shoot. It's affordable. It's possible. So do it. Thank you for joining me. I'm Corey Hunter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. I appreciate you. Thank you for spending time with me. If you got any questions or comments, leave it in the comments below. And as always, until next time.